Hey everybody, welcome back to the Calibrate Tools channel. Hope everybody's doing fine. Once again, it's Tuesday and let's talk. Let's talk, guys. Super Bowl, they just had that. And I'm not a big sports dude. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think I'll spend my time doing something else rather than sitting down and looking at a game all day. Nothing wrong with that. You know what I'm saying? Just me personally. I find interest in other things. But let's not kid ourselves. This is a very sports-oriented culture, right? And the problem I have with that is that it has misled many people, many families, especially in lower income communities, down the wrong path, right? Gives you that pipe dream to say, hey, look, my child is going to be the next Michael Jordan. My child is going to be the next Kobe Bryant. Or my child may be the next Wayne Gretzky, in the hockey player. Or the next, what's that baseball player's name? So many of them. Sammy Sosa or whoever, right? Or Bobby Bonilla, or one of them guys, right? Because that's that's the pipe dream that has been sold to a lot of people in this culture, right? Especially in the Western culture. And I think that has destroyed the future of many families. As a matter of fact, it has destroyed the generational wealth of many communities, particularly the African-American community, and maybe other communities as well, what they call minority communities. And I always had an issue with that, right? I even from a very young age, I used to observe that. Why are these parents pushing their kids into sports like this so much? Taking them to games, and hey, look, there's nothing wrong with that. Sports can provide a child with, structure, discipline, camaraderie, teamwork. It can instill all these things into a child. I have no problem with that, okay? But I think there's an unhealthy desire to see your child become some pro in the sports world. And I get it, right? Once you put them in there, why put them in there just to be, just for something to do, right? When there's so much potential on the upside. And that's what capitalism has done, right? It's turned a recreational activity into an investment, right? So I trade my child, right? I give my child to the sports gods, the coaches and the Pop Warner leagues and all that, the flag football leagues. And then in return, me as a parent, not only do I get to live vicariously, if you're one of those fathers, and some mothers too, not only do I get to live vicariously through my child, because I never became that big time athlete that I wanted to be. I never fulfilled my dreams. So I'm gonna put my dreams into this child, forget what the child wants to do, right? Forget their dreams. I'm going to train them to be this. I'm going to train them to be that. And if they don't do that, I'm going to be disappointed in them. The thing about kids is that they sense all of this, right? They may not tell you, and they may even have a proficiency to be a great athlete, right? They may have the propensity to become a pro athlete or a very good athlete, just like many of them do. But is that what they really want? Is that the best thing for their future? So once again, the discipline, the structure, the camaraderie, and all that stuff, that's good. But I think it can go too far. And when it comes to communities, especially the African-American community, and I do focus on that community, and I have to say this because that's my community, right? That's the community that I live amongst, okay? And I identify with that community. And I see the deficiencies in the community, and part of my channel and part of what I talk about is to help to bring awareness and remedy some of the things that I feel needs to be remedied, right? There's so many things, but this is one big pet peeve of mine here is this whole sports culture and how it's shoved down your throat, right? So you run into somebody and all they could do, the extent of their conversation is sports. Oh, you see the game yesterday, man? Yeah, who won that game? It's like, okay, why are we not talking about other things? Why does the extent of our conversation just have to be about sports? And I get it; it's an icebreaker, right? Everybody is into sports, and it's a good way to break the ice and start a conversation. But let's just say you started talking about the ills of society, right? Then all of a sudden their demeanor changes. It's like their face changes. Their face changes to a blank, like a kind of like a blank stare. It's like, okay, yeah, I was just talking about who won the game last night and who the best wide receiver is. Oh, did you see that basketball player? Did you see him dunk on that dude? Okay. Yeah, I saw it, man. But hey, look, we got more important issues to worry about here. You know, we have some schools that are underfunded. Our kids are not getting the right education. They can't even compete with once they get out of school. Matter of fact, their reading comprehension is so low that it's ridiculous. When you start talking about things like that, then it's like crickets. It's all science, okay? I mean silence. But you got everything in the world to say about who won the game last night, right? Who caught that pass, or and all this. And to me, it's just a reflection of the dumbing down of certain communities. And I would say not just certain communities, but the communities that can't afford to be dumbed down, right? You cannot afford to be dumbed down. If you're in a lower income community, you're on the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder. You have to realize that all these things like sports and entertainment, and there's a place for these things, don't get me wrong. I like to be entertained myself. But if it dominates the majority of your conversations, where you can't delve into other subjects and have an intelligent conversation about more important things, more things that are going to change the trajectory of your community, then what's the point, right? It's going to be at a standstill, right? So that's my whole thing about, like I said in the title, sports culture has ruined the future of lower income kids. Teach them a skill. Okay, so let's look at some stats right here, guys. Let's look at some stats. Where are we here? What is the percentage of high school students that actually play professional sports? Let's talk about that. Well, in the NBA, right, when we're talking about that league, says about 1 in 3,333 high school students or high school players make it to the NBA. NFL, about 1 in 4,233 high school players make it there. Right? That's even a lower percentage. The MLB, the Major League Baseball, that's a little bit higher. 1 in 200 high school players reach the pros. But this includes the minor leagues where the pay is often poverty level. Then you have the NHL. That's even lower. Okay. 1 in 4,000 to 5,000 students. Okay. So guys, just looking at the stats, wouldn't it be wise to say, okay, look, it would be great if you make it to the pros, talking to your son or your daughter or whatever. But looking at these stats, I think you would have a better chance of becoming a more productive human being. You could do the sports thing right now because, like I said, it's good to build character. But let's just, let's have this over here and let's concentrate more on this. Let's prioritize your education more. Let's prioritize you learning the skill more, right? Because the odds here of you becoming this, and it's not to kill anybody's dreams, but it's just to show people that, hey, listen, why are you pushing your kids into these institutions that, not, even if you make it in there, you have a window of time to be great. You got a window of time to be great, right? What is it for? Let me see. I think when it comes to NBA, it's like It says, okay, a basketball player's prime is typically 27 to 31 years old. So, if you haven't made it by your mid-20s, it's essentially over, is what they're saying. Compare this to becoming a doctor, right? You finish your training at maybe 30 years old. If you become a software engineer, you can start at 22 or 42. It doesn't matter. You can start at any age, right? A skilled tradesperson can work for decades. So I think you guys get my point here. All right, so we need to prioritize once again these education, learning a skill, learning a trade more than sports. We need to drive that into our kids' heads. Once again, there's a place for that. There's a place for, hey, I used to run track in high school. I love the experience. I waited till my last year. I didn't like my high school. Otherwise, I probably would have participated in sports a lot earlier, like, in school. But, I did my thing in my last year. And, but I had no aspirations of going further than that. Now, if I'd have started earlier, who knows? Maybe I would have pursued sports maybe on a more serious level. But, like I said, I observe this trend. It's not a trend. It's been happening for the longest time. That lower income children are scouted, right? They're scouted and pushed into these institutions with a lot of them don't even have any financial literacy. So even if they do make it to the pros, they they're not really managing their money correctly. Okay, a lot of them are not mentally mature enough to even handle the pressures of being in the limelight like that, right? The limelight, and so they end up doing very idiotic things. I think it's like every time you open the news, right? There's some athlete that's done something stupid and idiotic, and they land themselves in jail. They lose their career, or they get fined, or this or that. So, of course, that can happen to anybody. But I think it has a more dangerous effect on already vulnerable communities. Okay, and I think it's up to the parents who, and I think they probably need some training themselves. They need to wake up themselves and say, look, this is not the path that, even though it's pushed on us because we're lower income, and the powers that be know that, hey, these people are hungry. This child may be the only path out of poverty, right? This child may be the only generational wealth builder in this family. So we got to push them into sports. We got to forego their education, even though they can't even formulate a sentence correctly. It doesn't matter as long as they got the physical capacity to go out there and run on that field or run on that court. But they're not taking into effect the stats I just read to you, right? 1 in 3,000, 1 in 4,000. So once again, that leaves the community in another quandary, right? Everybody's so gassed up about being a pro or having their child go pro or whatever. That's all they think about. You either become an entertainer or you become an athlete, right? That's the ways out. The other way is a lot harder, right? Because a lot of doors have been slammed in your face. But we got to reject this type of mentality in our communities. Okay? We got to reject it because it's killing our communities. We shouldn't be focused so much on this. Because you have the owners of these teams looking at you as just pawns in the game. Oh, he runs a 4 in the 100. Okay, yeah, let's get that one right there. And you so happy, yeah. This is not the way. All right, so let's dive a little bit more into it. Let's dive a little bit more into it, okay? It says, if 100,000 kids play high school basketball, maybe 30 will play in the NBA. Most professional athletic careers are also short. The average NFL career is under 4 years, and career-ending injuries are common. The kids who make it are often genetic outliers with extraordinary physical gifts. But see, what they do is they take these genetic outliers and they, just like any business person would do, who's just trying to extract wealth from a certain place, extract resources. They're going to parade that genetic gift in front of everybody. Say, okay, yeah, you can be that, right? And this is how they get you, right? Now you got your kids going to the Pop Warners and all these little football practices every other weekend and working the hell out of them, and and they just now that kid is obsessed with not only trying to be a good athlete, but you have to understand one of the major drivers of a child's mind is to please, at some point is to please their parents. So that kid is now obsessed. All they can think about is sports. All they can think about is, trying to please that parent. And they take their mind off of other things. And that's not the kid's fault. That's the parents' fault. Okay. So it says the kids who make it are often genetic outliers, with extraordinary physical gifts combined with obsessive work ethic, excellent coaching, significant luck, avoiding injury, being seen by scouts, fitting team needs. This isn't to discourage sports. The benefits of playing are real, but banking on a professional sports career as the primary plan is statistically similar to planning to win the lottery. The kids most likely to succeed are often those who pursue sports passionately while also developing other skills as a foundation. And that's my whole point here. I'm not saying, hey, don't go for sports. Look, like I said, I ran track myself, and I love running track. I mean, it was one of the most exciting times of my life to have that outlet right in front of tons of people when you competed on the track field. Then you had a chance to meet all the other schools and see what's out there. So yeah, so it was fun. But okay, my point being is that you have to develop other skills as a foundation. You have to balance it out here. You just can't have your kid on that field all day working the hell out of them and just being disappointed in them when they don't perform like you want them to perform, right? That's where the problem lies. And it reminds me of when I used to see those shows about those mothers who had the cheerleading girls, and how those mothers were pretty much living vicariously through their daughters, who were in the cheerleading world, and they would just, some of the mothers attacked other mothers, even tried to unalive another. I mean, it got crazy, but I'm not saying all of the mothers did that, but it's that unhealthy passion that the parent has, okay, that spills over onto the kids in an unhealthy way as well. Okay. But once again, my focus is mainly on communities that need resources, right? And so these communities can't afford. They just can't afford to be in this lopsided game here where they're just waiting to be picked. It's almost like you go into an audition, you're an actor, and you're waiting to be picked for years and years, and you never get picked. And that whole time, you never developed another skill. You never had a job to back you up. And now, once you get a certain age, you don't have anything, right? You don't have anything to really, a skill set to keep you going. So we need to, get a rein in this old sports culture in our communities, where that's the main topic of conversation here. Let's talk about more productive things, and let those other things like getting an education, learning a skill, let that outshine the sports talk. Okay, and I don't think this is spoken of enough, to be honest with you. All right, let's talk about some other stats. It says you got roughly 8 million high school athletes across all sports in the U.S. Maybe about 48 480,000 compete in NCAA sports. That's about 6%. From there, only around 10,000 to 15,000 will ever play in the major leagues. Okay, that's the funnel here. It says, but here's where it gets more complex. Not all professional sports are equal. Minor league baseball players often make $12,000 to $40,000 per year. G League basketball pays better now, but still isn't generational wealth. European soccer leagues, lower tier hockey, these might be professional, but many players work second jobs. See, this is what they don't tell you when you're trying to push your kid into those sports. The physical reality, professional sports require a combination of attributes that's genuinely rare. Take basketball. You need to be not just tall, but coordinated, fast, with good basketball IQ, and a specific body type that handles the demands. Then you need the mental makeup to handle pressure, the work ethic to train obsessively, and the social intelligence to work within team systems. Okay? So it's more than just getting on a team. So even if you make it, you have to have all these other qualities to keep you there. And once again, there's coming from a lower income community where financial stress is paramount, right? Trying to keep food on the table. A lot of times, unfortunately, come from a single parent household. There's a lot of mental factors that may be shaky. So putting a kid coming from those environments versus coming from an environment, say a two-parent family or a environment where that wasn't so volatile, right? Coming from a volatile environment, whether it's in the family, meaning a single parent household, or maybe just a dysfunctional household, and where you had there was a lack of resources and all that, putting a child like that into sports, and even if they make it because they had the physical prowess to become a pro, they were picked, right? It doesn't mean they're going to be able to stay in that environment because they didn't have they weren't prepared psychologically to handle the pressures that come with being in that position. And that's why we see a lot of people, as they say, crashing out. And it's be like, okay, now you're making millions of dollars, but you're doing this dumb stuff, right? Why are you robbing a bank, robbing a store, or getting into some, when you're making millions of dollars? Well, you got to understand, a lot of these individuals didn't come from healthy environments in the first place. They didn't come from healthy home environments. They just had the skill. It's not like these people that draft these athletes are sending them to counseling, right? I mean, maybe some are. I don't know. And I'm not saying all athletes do this, but there's a preponderance of athletes that get into trouble all the time. And a lot of them, unfortunately, they come from lower income communities, which is a shame. But once again, it's not about getting to a certain point. It's about, are you mentally prepared? Is your character prepared to handle these environments? Because you're expendable. One thing you're gonna learn that, hey, look, if you don't make it, somebody else will take your place quick. And that's just how it goes. It's a capitalist system, and they will just, churn you out and replace you with the next person. That's just how it goes. The psychological cost, when you spend 10 to 15 years building an identity around being an athlete, and then it ends. Yeah, this is another part of it that they don't tell you about, but I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. Whether it's a high school, college, or an early pro career, the existential crisis can be severe. Depression rates among former athletes are high. They've often missed developing other aspects of themselves, hobbies, diverse friendships, intellectual interests. I'm going to focus on the intellectual interests. Now, I'll probably get a lot of flack for this. And I'm not saying I'm the most eloquent of speakers, but you can clearly tell when some of these athletes are interviewed that their command of the language is not up to par. That's not all of them, right? but at least have, at least practice that, right? Because you're not just running on a field with the ball, making touchdowns and dunking basketballs or getting that hockey in a puck. But let's just say you're the star of the team and you represent the team. Not only that, you represent the community that you came from. And if you're presenting yourself as unintelligent, then that just fits or reinforces stereotypes that are already out there. Okay, so this is why you should stress education first and foremost. It doesn't have to be a formal education. Look, you can homeschool your kids. Matter of fact, if I had young kids today, I'll probably think about homeschooling them more than anything else, especially, having to deal with, mass shootings and school shootings and all that in today's world. You can homeschool your kids, but, this responsibility comes down on the parent as well. So it's not just the kid here. They're just a reflection of their environment. There's also the injury reality. A knee injury at 19 can end a sports career permanently. But if at the same if that same person had been developing as a musician, a programmer, or a writer, or a electrician, plumber, I would say, or somebody with some hard skills, the injury wouldn't end their trajectory, because with those skills, guys, they can start a business, right? There's one guy, athlete, I don't know his name, but an injury ended his career, right? He had to move back home and live with mama again. Now, I'm not saying this is the case. He was like one of the rare cases, but he started a e-commerce business selling a fashion line. I think it was called, right now it's called Actively Black. I think it was a faith-based, the previous brand was called Actively something. And in fact, let me see if I can look him up, give him some props. Let me see, maybe some of you guys know what I'm talking about already. Actively. But he started this fashion line, and because of his intelligence and business savvy, and obviously because he was a pro athlete, he had connections, so he had a lot of financial resources to help him start what he started. But he didn't let his injury stop him. Matter of fact, he became I think his fashion companies earned millions of dollars. Both of his companies. And he faced, because he was African American, he used to hide himself from his own brand. And then he said he would go to meetings, and Let me see if I can find his name. Lonnie Smith, that's his name. He was a former NBA player, and he founded in 2020. He founded Actively Black, but he had a company before that. Yeah, so his previous company was faith-based. I think, what was the name of it? Anyway, I remember him saying that he used to go to, when he would show up at meetings, and the stakeholders or shareholders or whatever saw that he was an African American, and they immediately, showed their inherent bias towards him. And he grew up in a household where his family taught him to be proud of who he was, and it started to grate at his conscience, because he was building a brand where he felt he had to hide himself. And a lot of African Americans, and I'm sure other people in minority communities, but specifically African Americans, sometimes they feel they need to hide themselves from the brand, because they know when they go out there and they're the face of their own brand, that because of the country that we live in and the world that we live in, which a lot of it's anti-Black bias out there, that it's going to negatively affect their business and opportunities. So he showed up at these meetings, and he had to deal with this, and then sometimes he would get he would do his own customer service, and one of the customers called in, and he answered, and they asked him, "Hey, look, are you a black person?" And he said yes, and that customer pretty much said, "No, I'm not going to buy from you." So this is all the stuff he had to deal with, and then he said, "The hell with this, the hell with that. I'm going to focus on my folks. I'm going to focus on a brand that promotes Black excellence, right?" And that's what he did, and that brand is very successful. And I'm glad he came to that realization. It's like, look, we don't need to hide who we are. We know what we deal with out here. And my whole thing is like, I'm not hiding for nobody. You know what I mean? That's very weak. And I understand why we did it. I mean, there was another, what's that other movie about the banker? It was called The Banker. And that back in the days when these two African-American guys, they had to get a white guy to come and be the front for them to go into these institutions to get loans and all that. And I'm sure, look, maybe some people do that still today, but if you're hearing me out there in my community, don't feel you need to do that. I know sometimes we feel we need to do that, but you don't have to do that. Just be you and cater to your own community, because at the end of the day, I know there's money coming from everywhere. And it's not about, being against anybody else, but if they're against you, then the hell with them. We need to focus on our community anyway. We need to circulate the dollar within our own communities, right? That's the whole point. And sometimes we feel, oh well, our community doesn't have the money. That's BS. Did you guys hear the stats? There's we're the African American community is $1 trillion when it comes to wealth being extracted. So don't tell me there's not money there. We're just spending it elsewhere. We're not spending it in our communities. We need to be building in our own communities. Every other community understands this. Every other community benefits off of the African American community, the Black community, right? They market to you, they'll put African American, marketing materials, but it doesn't mean that these businesses are Black owned that are marketing to you. Matter of fact, most of them are not. So we need to market to our own communities, right? Since we have all this money that we're spending elsewhere. Can't blame anybody but yourself. It's just a mindset thing. Anyway, back to the sports thing. We can't make the sports culture the predominant wealth builder, sports and entertainment, because it has been, that's what it's been. We were forced to be entertainers and athletes, right? Because that's the only way we were accepted. And even, think about the entertainment. You could be a Sammy Davis Jr. or a Chuck Berry. You still had to go through the kitchen door just to come and perform. You couldn't even come through the front door. How sick and shameful is that, America? So the stuff that you see now happening is really just an extension of what's always been. So in order to protect ourselves in a system like this, we have to insulate ourselves financially, which means we have to train up our kids, not just to be athletes and entertainers. We can't, once again, like I said, we can't make that the predominant topic that we talk about. We can't just always have to break the ice with that topic when we meet each other out there in the world, right? We should be able to say, hey, look, man, did you hear that NVIDIA stock? Did you hear about that stock that went up? Talk about things like that. Oh, my kid is he just learned AI, become an AI master and all, things like that. I would love to see the conversations along those levels, because all this other stuff is just going to keep us in the loop, right? Yeah. So another thing too, before I end this live, let me see here. Hey Rito, how you doing, man? Strong topic, my brother. I think that colleges, big and small, should promote education just as much as they praise athletes once they become famous. Yes. Yeah, absolutely, man. It's almost like, teachers never get the credit that they should get. And so, I was going to close with this. It has to be more unity within our community. There's a lot of divisiveness, which is just, once again, it's another weapon to keep you on a certain level. That needs to stop. And I know I sound like, a voice crying in the wind when it comes to this, but you go on these platforms and you see the most divisive, topics within the community. And I just got to shake your head and say, look, this is exactly what they want. Right? So, guys, leave your thoughts. If you support what I do, you see the what's going across the screen right there, calibrate.com. Plus, I have other offerings for you guys that will help to support the channel and the work I'm doing out here. And I'm getting ready to come out with something for you guys, another training asset for you guys under your belt, to put under your belt, and I'll let you know. I'm going to keep calling it out for you. But I appreciate you guys coming on. Hope you got something from this. Share, and subscribe. Appreciate you. Have a good one. Take it easy, Reno.